They told her she wasn't allowed to leave. Her father had died, but the rich family she worked for said their garden party was more important than her grief. She begged for just a few hours to say goodbye, only to be locked inside the servant quarters. But what they didn't know was that someone was watching, and days later, their cruel secret would go public in the most explosive way possible. Because karma doesn't miss, especially when the world is watching. Miriam had worked for the Wexlers, one of the wealthiest families in the state, for over 6 years. She cleaned their mansion, cooked their meals, and raised their children as if they were her own. Quiet, kind, and deeply loyal, Miriam never asked for much. Her room was a converted pantry behind the kitchen, and her phone was kept in the laundry room during work hours. She followed every rule they gave her, until the morning she received the call. Her father had passed away. Back home in a rural town 2 hours away, the funeral would take place in 2 days. Tears welled in her eyes as she approached Mrs. Wexler. "Please, I need to go home. I'll return right after the funeral." But Mrs. Wexler didn't even look up from her phone. "We have a charity garden party this weekend. You're needed here. Reschedule." Miriam blinked in disbelief. "I can't reschedule a funeral." Mr. Wexler entered the room, overhearing the conversation. "You signed a contract. You walk out now, you forfeit your pay. Simple as that." Then came the worst part. They took her key card, locked her in the back room. "For security," they said. What they didn't realize? One of the Wexler's teenage children was secretly filming. Wait a second. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this. Lena Wexler, 16, had always looked up to Miriam. The quiet strength, the kindness. Lena saw more of a mother figure in her than in her parents, and she had seen everything. How her mother rolled her eyes when Miriam wept. How her father barked legal threats instead of condolences. So that night, Lena slipped her phone under the kitchen door where Miriam was locked in. The screen was already recording. The next day, Lena posted the video anonymously on social media, along with the caption, "This is how the rich treat the people who take care of their homes." She wasn't allowed to go to her father's funeral. Within hours, it spread like wildfire. By morning, local news stations picked it up. Then, national outlets. And soon, "Let Miriam Go" was trending worldwide. Reporters showed up outside the Wexler estate. Protesters gathered at the gates with signs reading, "Grief isn't a luxury," and "Maid, not property." But the Wexlers stayed silent. What finally broke the story wide open wasn't just the viral footage, but what came next. A second video surfaced, this time from a former housekeeper who revealed even more: withheld paychecks, forced overtime, and constant surveillance. More employees came forward. What started as a single heartbreaking injustice was now a flood of buried secrets. By the end of the week, the Wexlers were facing a PR nightmare. News anchors dissected their silence. Civil rights lawyers joined the conversation. Celebrities shared the story. Then came the lawsuit, filed by a former nanny who had been fired after requesting sick leave. Her story was nearly identical: emotional manipulation, threats of financial ruin, and a forced NDA. Now, the public wanted answers, but all Miriam ever wanted was to bury her father. She finally got to go home, escorted by a community group that funded her trip, with a crowd of supporters waiting in her town to embrace her. She stood by her father's grave, tears falling freely, not just from sorrow, but from the overwhelming support she never expected. And as the Wexlers watched their public image crumble, Miriam stood tall for the first time in years because she had been invisible for too long. Now, the world saw her. In the months that followed, the Wexlers lost brand deals, board seats, and social capital. Their name, once whispered in elite circles, became synonymous with cruelty and classism. Meanwhile, Miriam's story ignited a bigger conversation about domestic workers' rights. Labor groups pushed for new regulations. Lawmakers cited her story during hearings, and Lena, who had exposed her parents, moved out. She started a scholarship fund in Miriam's father's name, helping children of housekeepers get access to education. As for Miriam, she never returned to the mansion. Instead, she took a job with a nonprofit that advocates for live-in workers. She spoke at events quietly and humbly, always reminding people that dignity isn't something anyone has to earn. It's something every person deserves. Her final message at a televised forum echoed across the country. I was locked in a room when my father was being laid to rest. But I'm not here to shame one family. I'm here to remind every family that grief, love, and respect do not belong to the rich. Because sometimes the ones you silence end up being the loudest voices for justice. If you enjoyed this story and thought it provoking, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful narratives. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Take care.